Thank you. I appreciate you coming. I guess maybe by introduction, I should say that I was born in Salt Lake City, but raised in Sanpete County, so there actually wasn't, well, there was quite a bit of history, but it was all north of me or south of me, and I went north to get the education, so most of the history I started looking at least when I was doing some mathematics, was the history of northern Utah, and particularly then that this is the Mormon church and things that happened there. And so anyway, in 1970, after I got some degrees, I came down to Southern Utah University as a professor in mathematics. And one of the reasons why I got interested in history is I was the one that was assigned a history of mathematics course. And so I got very interested in the history of mathematics, and then that led to eventually getting a master's degree in history of science, which was very beneficial for me. Anyway, the Old Spanish Trail, Congress designated as a National Historic Trail in 2002. And it's a very, very interesting. This is a beautiful place, some great silhouettes east of Castledale, Utah, in the desert in Emery County. And you can see there's also a set of these. If you happen to be going to Colorado one of these days, stop in Green River. That's the easy one. You just get off the freeway and you go over and you can walk up to them and see them. And they're very nice, and they depict quite a few things. We'll talk more about it, but the packing of things. And by the way, this is a really small group. If you really had an Old Spanish Trail group, you're talking about 100 mules, okay? It wasn't 5 or 6 like we see in the silhouettes around the state. It was like 100 mules with people on them. The other thing you see is some Mexican. They were Mexican. They weren't Spanish. The word Spanish, I don't know, got in there because I think of John C. Fremont. But it really should be the Old Mexican National Historic Trail, all right, that went from Santa Fe, New Mexico, to Los Angeles, California. By the way, in 1829, California was part of Mexico as well as New Mexico. I think you all understand that. So it would have been better to have that as a name. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. Oh, yeah. I should say we're the 15th National Historic Trail in the country. There are actually now 21, and I didn't list all 21, but I listed 4, and the first 4 were created in 1978. Now, actually, we should go back 10 years earlier during the Johnson administration. The Congress decided they would have a National Trails Association group and create some national trails. And they did 2. One on the East Coast, a very famous one on the West Coast. What's the one on the East Coast? Appalachian Trail. I didn't even put, that's not a National Historic Trail. It was a scenic trail to walk. And the one on the West Coast? Pacific Crest, yeah. So they made 2 in 1968, and then they started doing things and saying, well, you know, we really got a lot of historic trails, but the bill just didn't say quite the right things to get a National Historic Trail. So they made some changes in the bill, or amendments to the bill, to create National Historic Trails. Now it turns out Utah has 4. You know one of them. What are the other 3? The 3 that go through Utah. Anyone want to? I'm acting too much like a teacher now. This is the way I used to do it. Okay? My questions were harder, though, in the old days because they were all mathematical. Okay, I want you to know that. So, what are they? Pony Express, Mormon Trail, and no, not Oregon. Oregon just about did it. They came down and just barely touched the border in northeastern Utah, and then went on up through Idaho to go to Oregon. It was California. Actually, if you took those three trails, California has the most trails in the state of Utah. They came in basically on the Mormon Road to Salt Lake City. Then they had two ways to go out of Salt Lake City that they used very often to go on west. Hastings cut off the one, the ones that go over to, the ones that go into California and when they had the big disaster in '49. Anyway, there are 11 national scenic trails that actually have been created after the Pacific Crest and the Appalachian Trail. The most recent, a couple of them, but the Arizona National Scenic Trail is one. Actually, if you want a great project, I would like to see someone, yes, Arizona's got a lot of nice things, but guess which state has a lot better things? Utah. And there's no reason why we couldn't do one from the St. George area, Utah Hill, and go on over to Arches or go on up to some other places. So, but anyway, those are the National Historic Trails. Let's see the next one. And founders of the Old Spanish Trail. I think we need to talk about a few. One of them was the expedition in 1776 of Dominguez and Escalante. Some of you may be aware of that because in 1976 we were having what kind of celebration? The bicentennial of the country. And the four corner states, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah, they were in Mexico in 1776. And so how do you create something that will excite people about, every state was given a lot of money to do things to celebrate that 200th anniversary. And finally, the four corner states got together and says, let's do Dominguez and Escalante. Because if you look at that trail, it goes from Santa Fe around back to Santa Fe. Just circles the Great Basin. And we put up monuments and everything else. It was the project that made us help celebrate the bicentennial of the country. And it's also a very, very important trail. And we'll have maybe more to say about it. Garces was a Spanish priest who went basically from Santa Fe straight west to Los Angeles. But that was a very dangerous way to go because of Indian difficulties, Apaches, others. They like to kill white people, and they didn't really like the Spanish invasion, even in New Mexico. So that was a difficult one. Jedediah Smith, you may know some more on, but he was a fur trapper. And so you get a lot of fur trade, and I would say basically the western half of the trail, i.e. the trail that went through Utah, was basically pioneered by Jedediah Smith in the early 1820s. He was in St. George in 25, and I think he came back again in 1826. And I'll actually show you an inscription that's in downtown St. George, 1826 inscription. Thank you for that. That reminds me I forgot already to turn mine off in case somebody calls me. But I'll show you one. Armijo was actually the most important person to create the Spanish Trail. He went from Santa Fe, basically followed Dominguez and Escalante over towards the Four Corners, what we now call Four Corners Point, with the four, and then he found the way that Dominguez and Escalante crossed the river, and then he came crossing of the Fathers, now buried by Lake Powell, and came right straight, followed the Utah-Arizona border basically from corner to corner. He went up and down, but he was he was really significant because he's the one who actually started a real trade trail. We'll talk about the trading later. Wolfskill and Yount pioneered, they went, if you're on a trail, the most important thing is what? Two things. Water is number one. Number two is food. Okay? If you don't have, you got to have grass to feed 100 mules. All right? You got to have water to water them. So this is something that you did. And Wolfskill and Yount followed the water, which basically goes across to, when it gets in Utah, it's Moab, Green River, a little north over Grand County to Castledale, down to the head of Salina Canyon, then comes down where I-70 goes down Salina Canyon. They also used the route through Fish Lake, although that was not a good one in the spring because you can't ever get in there in the spring. All right, too much snow. But Yount and Wolfskill did that. Wolfskill just stayed in California. He's a real pioneer. Rubidoux, northeastern Utah, Colorado. There's a Rubidoux Fort, other places. D. Julian, I don't know, have any of you been down the Colorado River and saw the Julian signature on the cliffs of, he was everywhere. At the head of Salina Canyon, we've never found the inscription at the head of Salina Canyon. He liked to sign his name everywhere. He was a graffiti guy. In fact, we maybe say something about the graffiti with Dominguez and Escalante and also with Armijo. Because once it gets to a certain age, then the graffiti no longer becomes what? Graffiti, it's an antiquity. And so we have one of those, so we basically know where Armijo went across. They were marking the trail. Yeah. Well, I think for Dominguez and Escalante, they were actually signing we've been here, and the problem is it just, it was sort of, we've been here in case we all die and you don't know it. Okay, on we go. Here's the trade trail. Woolen goods made in Santa Fe area in Mexico were serapes, something just wrap around your shoulders, keep you warm, clothes, all right? They didn't have those in California. No sheep then. You understand the significance. There's maybe a few, but sheep don't come until you get to the Spanish Trail when they start to import them, and then even after 1848, the official years. So woolen goods were just priceless and very expensive in California for the Mexicans. But they did have one thing that they could raise very, very well in California: horses and mules. And so you go trade your serapes for horses and mules. Now, why were they valuable in Mexico? Or in Santa Fe, in New Mexico? Transportation. Everybody was after them in those areas. So this was a very, very good trade. And that's what Armijo did. He just took a big caravan of woolen goods to California, and he came back a rich man. One trip, all right? Rich man. He never made another trip. I don't think he really need to, because I think he had enough money from the one trip. I mean, he had established a career with one trip to California and back. All right? But others decided to follow very quickly. Now, there were some bonuses along the way, sadly. One of them was Indian slaves. And so the Indian slaves would, they'd catch a Paiute over here in this area, or Indians further south, over in, a lot of them from Utah, and then they would capture them as a slave. Mainly, I mean, the most expensive slaves were which ones of all of the slaves that they would pick up? Women, young women. Why? Because they're women, weaker. I'm not trying to knock you down, but they were handled much easier. The women were easy to make slaves. That you had jobs. They could. Oh my gosh, you could cook. They could cook for you, all kinds of things, so the other ones were the next. We're talking maybe $300 or $400 in those days.
Are you going to behave yourself?
Yeah, I will. $300 or $400 in that time period. A lot of money for a young woman to make a slave. And by the way, they went both ways. So if you were on your way back, and you could pick up a couple of slaves and sell to somebody in Santa Fe, it's okay. And the same way in Los Angeles, going the other way. So, I mean, that's kind of sad. The next most valuable group were what? Children. Yeah, children, but mainly young boys, because they could actually make them work for a week or two. And then when they got to be teenagers, what happened? They know how to find their way out of town, okay? Once you get to be a teenager. Adult men, worthless, okay? All right, still are, huh? Okay, still are. I'm sure the ladies will tell you that. But, all right, so the other thing too that I think you'll find quite exciting on the trail is because horses were so valuable, there were thieves, mainly not Paiutes, but Utes from northern Utah, Wakara and others, would go down to California, find some horses, and then steal them and run them back up to northern Utah. And they did extremely well. I mean, that was a very, so thieves like to use the trail too, the horse thieves. I think just for the fun of it, if you ever get a chance, go read 1,000. This is 1,000 Dead Horses by Rod Miller. It's fictional, but it's really real. You really get to understand what happens during that big thievery. I mean, they went down and organized a theft of 3,000 or 4,000 horses and mules. I mean, think of that. And then they raced them out of up the what's the big canyon coming up out of Los Angeles there? El Cajon. Yeah, came up El Cajon Pass and then out across the desert there this way. And when you think about that, I mean, that 1,000 horses. No, they didn't keep them all, but they had there was at least 1,000 dead ones along the way, but they still had a lot of horses made. No, they were Indians. Pegleg Smith, a fur trapper who lost his leg, but then put a peg on it. A handicap peg. He was an interesting guy. There's all kinds of stories there. Okay. Anyway, this is a great book if you want to. It's really like you're on the trail, like you're with that adventure in 1838, 39, somewhere around there. There were three primary reasons why the Spanish Trail sort of ends in 1848. And you can see what they were. The U.S.-Mexican War. The United States decided they wanted New Mexico. And they no longer had the ability to do what they had been doing. And so they also wanted California. All right. And a couple of years later, of course, there's no way they'd ever get it back because of the gold rush in 1849. The second reason is main part of the trail, the longest part of the trail, at least if you do the 6 states that it crosses, the Utah section of the trail now is controlled by Mormons, and they don't really like slavery. They don't like the trading of women, and they didn't need the Serapis. They figured they could do a lot of that kind of stuff themselves. And so that's another reason. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the gold rush. It ends, all right? The trade, as a trade trail, it ends. Now, it doesn't really end because we make roads and we keep on trading. We just trade other things. And we still have one, which side? That side. It's called Interstate 15, and they trade constantly every second of the day. Millions and millions of dollars of trade between Southern California and, I mean, you know, it's still there. It wasn't the same as the old Spanish Trail. Next slide, dear. Now, the northern branch, there are several branches of the trail. One went north out of Santa Fe, up through New Mexico, into Colorado, and then over to Grand Junction, and then out across, basically following I-70 from Colorado to Green River. And I mentioned it's a pretty boring place to drive. You probably have driven it and you said, boy, I'll be glad to get to Colorado where I can see some mountains or do something. But there are two places you really need to stop to get old Spanish Trail history. One of them is the Green River Museum. Right as you cross the river, it's on the east side of the river. A beautiful museum. It's got lots of other things, but it's got a lot of information about the Spanish Trail. The other one is, you told me, what was that important word that they need? Water. Sago Canyon is a great place because there's water. The water comes down. Now, you don't see much of it today because I think we're in a much drier period, but you can tell it was there. And there's another reason you need to go to Sago Canyon. It's got maybe the best Indian glyphs in the state of Utah, period. All right, but people, they went up and down there, and there are inscriptions in that desert area. They found some, and you know, in my early days, I didn't think it was Spanish Trail, and so I just basically ignored it, and that's why I never went to see Rubidoux' signature in northeastern Utah, and those things. And I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd have. Then in those days I was younger, and I would have gone to see those and even hiked a little ways if I had to. Okay, the next one. Oh, that's what the brochure. There's a nice, beautiful brochure. You can pick it up, especially in Moab or probably at the visitor center, going out or coming back when you're going to Colorado on Interstate 70. Okay. The Armijo route, as I told you, I described it once before, went from Santa Fe straight east over to Four Corners, then followed the Utah, what we now call the 37th parallel. And how many roads have you got along the 37th parallel? You got the one from Hurricane over to Fredonia. Yeah, no, it's not 9. That's yeah. Anyway, I don't remember the number right now. But then where do you have one after that? Well, I guess you have to go up to Kanab and go east, and then go over to Page. Then there's one from Page that goes around. So you can follow by the road, a road if you want to get an idea of the country they went through. But of course, they just went where the horses could go.
There's a bunch of dirt roads that kind of follow.
Yes, there's a lot of dirt roads that follow the old Spanish Trail, everywhere. All right, I'll give you some when we get a little closer to town. But there's some of them. I've got Church Rock, Navajo National Monument, the John Wesley Powell Museum in Page. These are places to go see. Of course, Glen Canyon Dam. The only reason you want to go see there is you know that they didn't have the old Spanish Trail didn't cross the Colorado River very easily. Yeah. All right, and all you have to do is just drive down to the dam, and then you understand why. And then most of you say, I don't want to ever go there again. I've got a few in my family. Sort of, she doesn't realize how deep it is when we cross the bridge. That's the only reason why she doesn't say that. She doesn't like the heights. and of course, the big water to Kanab, the Grand Staircase Escalante, all right. The Pipe Springs National Monument was a place that Armijo stopped for. What did he stop for? Water.
Well, and there's grazing land.
Oh, there was grazing land all around too. I mean, why do you think it's there? All right? It's the water and the grazing. That's why Pipe Springs is so darn important. Now we don't think of it that way today because, you know, we have a whole trunk full of, we got a container in our trunk with 15 bottles of water, all right, or whatever. We can stop any place for water, but you don't stop for water. You carry some with you, but you've got to have water at different places. So my main goal when you follow a historic trail, follow the water. All right, the single most important thing for them. The food comes in. Well, here's Church Rock, east of Cayenda in Arizona. Go ahead and go through them now, and I think I'll remember. That's one. Go through. We'll get a few places. Oh, I took you already to the Virgin River. I didn't stop because you've been to all those other places, I know. Do you see this? There's a L and a K. 1, 8, 2, 6. All right. That's at the junction of. Now I can't guarantee that that's authentic, but it certainly looks authentic, and it's sort of in a place that I can't imagine anybody going up and scribbling it. There's a more famous one on the road to Enterprise from St. George. It's called Kit Carson. And someone told me there's a Kit Carson one out there, and he said, "I know it's over here." And I went to see it, and a nice Kit Carson sign, Kit Carson, 1865. But then I went to New Mexico. I've been there several times, at Taos and other places, and where Kit Carson's buried, and he died in what? 1864. Okay, so that one went down the toilet pretty fast. It's still interesting to see, but it's not authentic. I think this one's authentic. All right.
LK, what was the
LK, I don't know. I haven't found them, but I just have a year and an LK. If you find somebody that fits the bill, somebody that was with Jedediah Smith, if you find an LK with Jedediah Smith, that could be, but this was a main place to come. I mean, when Jedediah Smith came in 1825, he would have gone with the water right down the Virgin River, except it's a hell of a place to go. I mean, I don't know any other way to describe it. In fact, John D. Lee came down and explored it in 1850 and 51, said, no one will ever build a road down that canyon. It's awful. All right, it's got quicksand. It's an awful place to go visit. It's a terrible place to go visit. Then, of course, we said, well, we can afford $1 million a mile, and we built it. Okay, I-15. All right, the main route. Cassid, Colorado, I got a picture to show you what that is. Actually, there was a picture, well, it was on one of the magazines I think you were showing, and we'll show you a picture of that. The historic trail museums and sites in Moab, there's lots of them. There's a really nice one, the power companies over in the San Rafael by Castle Dale have a great museum you can go see. The Red Creek Trail kiosk, that's the head of Salina Canyon. I think I have a picture of that. And the Fish Lake Old Spanish Trail silhouettes. If you ever get a chance, do that Fish Lake Road that goes, well, it sort of goes up to Fish Lake and then around and then down towards Loa to catch the road that goes over. And there's some beautiful things there. And then actually at Clear Creek, there's a Jedediah Smith monument. If you get off of I-70 and go over and see the state park there and drive along the road, the regular road, the one we used to drive all the time when we were younger, there's a nice Jedediah Smith monument there. There's probably others. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, there's the Casa Color Latina. Now, I just got to visit that. I've been looking for that for quite a long time because I've been interested in the trail for at least 30 years, 25 years. And that's 10 feet across. My hiking stick, which I stuck down on the side of it, it's straight down, by the way. It's not sloped in. It's just straight down. The rock just churned and churned and churned, cut the hole deeper and deeper and deeper, just like they do in Zion. And it's at least 10 feet deep, maybe 8 or 10 feet across. And I was there. This has been the hottest, hottest year in Utah, second hottest in the history of, and I was just over, it's a little early, I have to admit, it was in May, 1st of May, but how many gallons of water is that? Well over 2,000 gallons, probably 3,000 gallons of water in that one hole, right there. How much can a mule drink? Even if there's 100 of them. I'm sure the guys on the horses took off their clothes and what? Jumped in and had a bath and enjoyed a swim. I mean, it is a really impressive thing to see. And by the way, they're having a Moab thing on September the 20th. If you happen to be over there, they're going to do the book review of this book by Greg Crampton. This is the best history probably, but it only does the main trail of the Old Spanish Trail, Crampton and Madsen's book. But they're going to have a book review of this, and the idea is to get the markers and take people over to see that. It's not hard to get to, it's just hard to find. I know I spent an extra 3 miles or 4 miles, and at 80, it's too many.
And you made it back.
And I made it back. Okay. This is at the Fish Lake. This is at the head of Salina Canyon. It's a nice monument there. Somewhere in that neighborhood is where the D. Julian signature is, because the surveyors, the early Utah surveyors, Gilbert, I think was his name, mentions him in his notes, but no one's ever found it. I think what happened is when they built I-70 through Salina Canyon, somebody kicked the rock over that had his signature on it, but I don't know. I'd still like to, if it's there, I'd like to find it, but it'd make me famous, it'd make any of you famous too, and it may be easy to get to, maybe something, just walk off a road and there it is. Okay, now let's get local. Iron County has a lot of stuff, a lot of historic sites. There's there's some historic signs and stuff on Highway 20, that's the Interstate 70 to Highway 89 drive, which by the way is not a very good way to go. It wasn't the Spanish Trail, only half of it was. The eastern half of that highway is the Spanish Trail. To go south, you got to take the dirt road that goes down to Paraguna. And that's the way everybody who lived in Utah did until I think about 1955 or so, 53, when they built Highway 20. It's the most important to go from Panguitch to Cedar City in the ancient days too. Exit 100 has some interesting historic mentions the trail, but also when Parley P. Pratt came in 1849 to explore and say, hey, we need to settle down here. One of the main reasons is they found some iron in Iron County on the west side of Cedar City, and they said, hey, this is worth more than any of it. Let's go get the iron. At the mouth of Little Creek, where the trail actually went, is the signature of William Knight. I'll show you what that is. Parowan City Park has some monuments too. Let's go to the next slide and I'll see which one. This is exit 100. These are Mormon ones. Armstrong went through there in 41, and I think that's J. Wiley in 61. Some pretty good inscriptions in the cliffs at exit 100. You just have to go east on the Fremont Road. It's where John Fremont came down in 1850. He almost died coming across Colorado, and he was doing a survey or trying to get a survey for the railroad to come through here, and he found out it was not an easy task to get through here, and Fremont came down that canyon. William Knight is the one that's really interesting. William Knight at the bottom of Little Creek Canyon, and I hate to admit this was probably 25 years ago. I wanted to be able to get a good picture, so I put chalk on it, which is dumb. But I didn't know anything about preserving inscriptions. And there's 1842 William Knight. At first I thought it was it's got to be a fake, because there's knights everywhere around southern Utah. But then I got checking, and lo and behold, there was a William Knight that went down in 1841. And I thought, wow, let's find out more about William Knight. Then I found out William loved California. So he went right back to, in the spring of 42, he went back to Santa Fe. I don't think he stopped here. I think he was in a big hurry to get back home to his wife and other things. His liquor, he owned a liquor store. He was also an MD. He was an MD from eastern Utah. A doctor, but he liked being out in the wilderness, so to speak. And then in the fall of 42, he came down the Spanish Trail with his wife, created Knight's Landing and a bridge in California, and he made more money not hunting gold, but getting people across the Stanislaus River to go get gold. He just charged them a quarter or something like that. It's probably quite a bit in those days, maybe $1. All right, and he was a very, very rich man. Then got killed a couple of years later, 48 or 49. But it's a great. The 1831. I mentioned William Wolfskill. William Wolfskill went to California too, and in 31. He played around too much on the Sevier side of the old Spanish Trail, coming down the Sevier River from Salina Canyon down to just before you get to Panguitch. You go through the Circle Cliffs at Circleville, then the road goes Highway 20, the east side of Highway 20. But he didn't catch that because it got too late in the year, and he went past into Panguitch. Now, if you pass and go to Panguitch, how do you get across the mountain? Tell me. If you're today, how do you get across the mountain if you pass Panguitch? You pass Panguitch, you're on your way to Bryce Canyon for a minute, and then how do you get across? Oh, you can do Panguitch Lake Road. When did they build that one? Yeah, maybe 1880. All right, it's still almost dirt. What else? Cedar. You can go across Cedar Mountain, Highway 14. Let's see, when did they build Highway 14? And by the way, think just for a minute going across Highway 14. Would you and your life go the way that road goes? I mean, think about that wonderful view of Zion National Park off to the right, and you riding your horse along the edge of that hill. Wouldn't that be a wonderful way to go? No. It's a wonderful way to go now, but it's a lousy way to cross. Wolfskill, then what's the next road? I mean, decent place to cross. Zion National Park. You can go through Zion, right? You've done it. Until you get to the tunnel, and then you don't go anywhere. You didn't go anywhere anyway. When did they build the tunnel? 1930. I mean, 33, 34, when they finished it. There's no place to cross the mountain. So you got to go, you just have to play around and search and go. and Wolfskill had a really, really rough time going across. He ended up coming down Braffitt's Canyon, which is just next to Paraguna, just south of Paraguna. All right, an awful place to go down. Even today, it's still a super steep road. I mean, they have a road that goes that way. It's a better way because you go around the north side of Cedar Breaks instead of trying, like Highway 14 goes around the south side. I mean, he realized he made a big boo-boo. And I think they were thinking, there it is. They wrote that. And everyone thought for a while, oh, TW, who's TW? Except it's not TW, it's IW. Oh, IW, who's IW? I is the old Spanish inscription or letter for Jose, Joseph, all of them. Julian, Julien, but if you go look at the signatures of Julian, they all look like what? IUL. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? It's the way they did it. And it was in Santa Fe, Wolfskill was Jose. I mean, he went by a Spanish name in a Spanish city. It was Jose. And so I'm almost certain that 1831, that's actually where he came down. I think it's really authentic. Okay, a good water hole by Cedar, keep going. Three Peaks, Iron Springs, Party P. Pratt, Antelope Springs, go on to the next one. Oh, this is one of the reasons why I got interested in Alva Matheson, an old man in Cedar City, died a long time ago, but he said, I got to show you where it is. He said, I asked my dad, why is this so beat up? Well, when you run 100 mules across it, going both ways, plus maybe 1,000 horses, and you do that for 18 years, what happens? You get some, and that's one of the places. Go ahead. By the way, in 1950, William R. Palmer decided to do mark the trail. He decided to do it, guess how quick? One day. He just got people from all over, organized them, and said, put these monuments up. We'll do it on, I don't remember which day it was, in 1950. And they all went out, I think it was in September, and put up, I don't know, 50 or 75 monuments from Santa Fe to... There's one of the monuments that William Palmer, Alva Matheson put in. There's another one that, here's another good one. If you go on the road between the dirt road, instead of going over to Enterprise, take the dirt road that goes up through the canyon. And then you'll see this, the Spanish Trail. You can tell where the Spanish Trail is. We still have some great traces of it. Now, here we got Mesquite, from Mountain Meadows to Mesquite. Now, I think this old Spanish Trail explains Mountain Meadows. And it was called Mountain Meadows. And why is it so significant to the Spanish Trail? What? Water? Food. If you've ever been there, and sometimes in the spring, it's not as good as it used to be, but you see the whole valley full of grass. It's gorgeous to see it. We don't get as much now because they steal all the water and put it in tanks and run it to your house. Okay? But it's there. Now, why is it important on the Spanish Trail? Do you know where does the Spanish Trail go after that? See that fourth one down? Utah Hill. Let's see. That's old Highway 91. That's the way you used to always go, isn't it? All right. You all went that way. I know. If you've lived here very long, you drove that way. That's the way you went. What is there out there?
Not much.
Not much. Did you see any water wells?
Well, there's that one.
Yeah, there's that one at that gas station where they put some in a tank and gave you some water.
Do that one. I remember cars overheating going up.
Yeah, I was even in that. You know, when I drove up the hill from Vegas, when I was first dating her and I went to see her, brother down in Las Vegas, actually Henderson. I drove up at midnight in an old Ford. You know why I did it at midnight? It was cooler, and I figured I might actually make it up the hill. All right. Now, I was only a teenager, but I understood Utah Hill was a nasty, warm, hot place. All right. And so, okay, now let's go back to Mountain Meadows. What happens after you leave Mountain Meadows? Think about from Mountain Meadows going down 91 and then go all the rest of the way to Los Angeles. Think about what you see. On I-70, I-15. Desert. Desert, desert, desert. So what do you do at Mountain Meadows if you're going down? You tank up. What do I mean tank up? You stay there for a week or a week and a half, 10 days. You water every one of them. You feed them good. You rest because you know what you're going to have to do the rest of the way to Los Angeles. Yes, there'll be a few water holes and there'll be a few places to feed your animals, but there's not going to be any what? Mountain Meadows. Now, let's be in Los Angeles and come up. What do? You run from water hole to water hole to water hole as quick as you can do it. Yeah. And that's, you don't ever do it in July and August. You always do it in the spring or in late fall. You do it in the winter even. You probably don't want to try to come up after November, because then when you get to Cedar City, it actually snows there once in a while. All right? And if you go a few of those mountain passes, like...
Well, we don't have the grazing either.
You don't have grazing, so there are certain times. But think about coming up. Water, you got to get here as quickly as you can, and then where do you get to next? Mountain Meadows, and then what do? You wait for a week or 10 days. I mean, it's no, think about this. That's why there's a Mountain Meadows massacre. Those people had to wait there. Even in 1857, you have to wait there. And then things boil up in Cedar City and other places, and a massacre occurs that probably shouldn't occur. Had it been today, we would have just got what? In the car and drove on. They never would have been there. Do you understand how important Mountain Meadows is? Mountain Meadows is a crucial, important place to understand Spanish Trail. It's God's saver. I mean, it saves your whole thing. Going both ways. Do you understand that? Both ways. No matter which way you go. You don't run through Mountain Meadows as fast as you can. You don't do it. Okay. I don't know what else I got. Oh, I got a picture of me at the sign now. Go on. There's Utah Hill. That's what we're talking about. You know, that's what it looks like all the way to Los Angeles, the way I remember it last. Let's see. Did you see any big? You saw some buildings in Las Vegas. They had a pretty good spring there, by the way. They had a wonderful spring, and they would stop there. But how far is it from Mountain Meadows to the spring in Las Vegas?
Over 100 miles.
Yeah, 120 miles or so, and you're lucky to get any water in between. This was the toughest part of it, going down Utah Hill. There's, next time you go, stop and look at the mules. These are some the BLM put in a couple of years ago, last year or so and a half, and I think it's one of the most beautiful. Actually, if I took all 21 National Historic Trails and I said, which one's the most beautiful to actually drive and see? Guess which one I'd choose? The old Spanish Trail.
You gotta like desert though.
You got to like some desert, but even you know, those cliffs going through the forests in Fish Lake or up Salina Canyon, there's some beautiful places. By the way, One of the reasons for the delay coming from Santa Fe towards Utah is, what do you have in most of those places? Mountains and water. You have, it's an easy walk. Okay? It's when you go from place to place and you say, I mean, I'm not going to have any trouble here. In many cases, you just walk alongside a stream. And okay, when do you start worrying about water? If you think about going up to, when you leave Colorado and you go to Moab, you remember what's along there? You start worrying about water. Between Moab and Green River, I think you remember, what do? You worry about water. You go as fast as you can from Moab to Green River. From Green River around to the head of Salina Canyon. Do you see what happens when you get to Utah with the Spanish Trail? You have to move. You can't just lollygag and stop and, cook steak, whatever, sleep in every morning, whatever you want to do. You've got to move. Once you start to get to the desert countries, but if you're going through New Mexico and Colorado, yes, there's some dry places, but they're really beautiful, wet, great places to see. The biggest danger starts when you hit to Utah.
Yeah, and you
All
don't
right.
save anything by breaking off in the middle of the day to avoid the heat, because you're out, there's no...
That's right. That's why you always get up early. And by the way, if you've got a mule, you don't stop for lunch. Why? Well, it's not never get it going again. They lay down, and then you got to either beat them to get, but they lay down, and whatever you had on their packs might get scratched up, ripped. They lay on a rock, all right, cactus, whatever. You get them up, you get them going. Then when you get your day's done, early afternoon, you unpack them. Then you wait. You send maybe a scout out to see where the next water is, stuff like that. Okay, I hope I've given you an idea about the Old Spanish Trail. Thank you for coming. And if you have questions, I guess I'd entertain any questions you have.
There's a beautiful piece of music that was created about this old Spanish.
Yes, there was. That was, I don't remember the exact time, but they do have one called the Old Spanish Trail Suite. And I don't know if it's online or if you can get it. You probably...
See parts of it online.
Okay.
Our daughter performed part of it, and it's beautiful. And
Yeah.
It helps you to visualize the different parts of what would happen.
Yeah, I think they did it in Cedar City about 10 years ago, or 15 years ago. Yeah, it's a very nice thing, so good comment. Any other questions, comments? You can ask me any question too. I love this southern Utah. The three best things for me on the Spanish Trail were: one, move to southern Utah when I found out there's another history to understand. And two, seeing that cross from Alva Matheson. He found it in a bunch of in a rat's nest, and it's now in a museum in Castledale. But he showed me that, among other things, artifacts that he found, and then he took me out on the trail a little bit too. And then I had Boy Scouts that we went. We did lots of things, and it was a lot of fun. Okay.